So in my part one about disfellowshipping or shunning, I talked about whether it was a loving arrangement, to disfellowship or shun someone. And like I said, love has nothing to do with it. It's all about power. The second part of this discussion here is it scriptural? Is it scriptural to disfellowship or shun one of the members? Is it scriptural to kick one of your members out of your religion for not obeying a religious law? The scripture that the organization, Jehovah's Witness organization, uses, 1 Corinthians 5:11 and 13. Now, I will say, that it being scriptural is not really an issue simply because you can use any scripture to make any doctrine you want. This is a religion. So what does the Bible have to do with religion? You can make up any doctrine you want. And that's why there's so many different religions. They make up their doctrines, and then they can grab the Bible or scripture in the Bible somewhere to support the doctrine. It doesn't mean that the Bible supports the religion. No. You can point out a whole lot of ways in which the religions are false. I mean, we used to do that. Jehovah's Witnesses go argue with people about the falsity of their religion. Well, Jehovah's Witnesses is the same way. You can take any scripture that you want and make any doctrine that you want. So, do Jehovah's Witnesses have the God-given authority to kick one of its members out for not obeying a religious law? Again, the question comes back to, what does God have to do with religion? He didn't set up the religion, did he? So it's really not an issue as to whether that religious law is scriptural. It's a religion. If their religious practice is scriptural, it's just a religion. So trying to discuss whether it's scriptural, I leave that part alone. See, listen, the religion, and all religions, including Jehovah's Witnesses, don't get their authority from God. They get their authority from the Constitution of the country that they are in. That's where their authority comes from. So it's not a matter of whether the Bible supports what they do. It's does the Constitution, in this case of the United States, support what Jehovah's Witnesses do in terms of kicking out one of its members. And since religions generally don't have a great degree of regulation, that's up to the religion to kick people out. To show you that it's a really a legal matter, I want to refer you back to something that happened in Jehovah's Witnesses back, I want to say, in the mid-'80s. Now, if you've been around for a while, they used to have those regional building committees, and what the committees would do is they come in and tell you need to remodel, and then you get a loan. If you didn't have the money, you have to get a loan from the organization, pay back the loan. I think they had like 3% or whatever the case may be. But you had to pay back that loan, and then you had to get all the supplies and make all your choices from what the Jehovah's Witness organization put out in terms of remodeling your hall. So anyway, back in the mid-'80s, a congregation, I want to say in Texas, refused. They were like, look, our building is paid for. We like our hall just the way it is. We don't want to be forced to remodel our congregation, and then we got to pick everything from you guys and what you guys say the shape and designs inside the Kingdom Hall is supposed to look like. We don't want to do that. So they got this argument going, and it got eventually to a legal case before the U.S. government, all right, before a judge. So the judge, at hearing the case, asked this question to the attorneys of Jehovah's Witnesses from the organization. He said, are you a hierarchical organization, or are you a congregational organization? Well, they didn't know how to answer, so they had to give it some thought, to have it discussed at the governing body level, and then come back and give an answer. Then they came back and said, we're a hierarchical organization, not a congregational organization. So therefore, the judge rules in behalf of Jehovah's Witnesses because you're organization. You're hierarchical, and Jehovah's Witnesses had set their organization up at that time as hierarchical because you had the governing body, you had the district overseers, and above them, like, it was the zone overseers, And then you had the circuit overseers below the district overseers, and you had the elders. That's how it was. It was hierarchical. So they had to come back and say hierarchical because that is the way they had actually set it up. But then you also have to take all the consequences with being hierarchical. So therefore, if an elder molests a child, then the governing body was responsible because it's hierarchical. Now, recently they've tried to go back to congregational, which they actually did. They went back to congregational. One judge wouldn't buy that, so he still made the organization responsible for this child molestation case. But yeah, Jehovah's Witnesses, in their legal authority, have now changed to become congregational. So now the congregation makes decisions, and they're responsible for the consequences of their decisions legally. And so what is that saying to you guys? Is that the organization's right to kick someone out because they did not follow a religious rule is based on the Constitution. It's a legal authority, not a scriptural one. So that's why it's not something that's even worth discussing in that terms of using 1 Corinthians chapter 5 verses 11 and 13 about the situation being a scriptural thing. It's not scriptural. It's legal. But if you really want to get this issue in terms of the scriptures, there is actually scriptural precedent for Jehovah's Witnesses, a religion, kicking out one of its members for not following a law. This may blow you away a little bit, or maybe it'll make you think. If you look at Romans chapter 6 verse 16, I'm going to read it. It says, "Do you not know that if you present yourselves to anyone as obedient slaves, you are slaves of the one you obey, either of sin leading to death, or obedience leading to righteousness." Now, just the first part of that scripture is the issue. If you present yourselves to anyone as obedient slaves, you are slaves to that one you obey. I mentioned this before. Go back to your second baptismal question. That second baptismal question is a legal question. Now, whether we were baptized by ignorance, coercion, or obligation, we still said yes to that legal question. We presented ourselves as slaves to obey the Jehovah's Witness organization. And since we made that legal agreement, the spirit world backed that legal agreement. So we were subject then to all the consequences of the slavery in which we submitted ourselves to in reference to the Jehovah's Witness organization. So if that organization then subjects all of its people to mind control and community theft by controlling everyone in your community, and then they want to kick you out of that community, then we're slaves. It's real. Now, you may not really see it that way, but hey, go back for a second. When you went out in field service, you put in volunteer hours. That's what we say. You volunteering. But really, I'm for real. We were forced to do it. It was an obligation of force in order to remain in the organization, right? So you went out in field service. How much did you get paid for it? You regular pioneer. How much you get paid for it? Auxiliary pioneer. All them hours, going to the meetings, holding mics, especially if you were a brother. How much did you get paid for that? Serving as an administrative servant or an elder, you volunteering your time. How much you get paid for that? You know why? It's because we presented ourselves as slaves. We didn't get a dime because we were slaves. So we subjected ourselves to that. We were slaves. All the consequences that came with slaves, including the fact that that organization had kicked us out at whim. So that's really the larger issue. Is the slavery that we subjected ourselves to. But here's the thing, and that's why I really talk about my platform here is not a platform to really go after the organization like so many of them. I've looked at some of the ex-JWs, and they really do make a living, or a little stipend, or whatever, how you want to call it. They make money off of condemning the organization, and then I'm not really into that myself per se. I do use the experiences as a point of reference, but I'm not really into bashing the organization on that end, and I'm constantly bashing the organization. I really would rather just talk about the scriptures and help ex-JWs to come to Christ, really. Not those that want it. And actually see that there is great benefit in coming to Christ, especially when you get rid of religion. So don't leave one religion, go to another, because you're not really benefiting. Unless you know you can benefit from that religion. Don't get me wrong, you may be able to benefit, because there is some benefit when you get into those different religions. But when you get in to those religions, there's consequences to it. Okay, things you're going to be involved in. So anyway, I just wanted to make this point real quick about what we were subjected to. When you look at Galatians chapter 5 verse 1, here's the thing. It says, "For such freedom Christ set us free. Therefore stand firm and do not let yourselves be confined again in a yoke of slavery." So I'm saying that we're free. Well, if you left the organization, we're free. Become a Christian. Really get into being a Christian and serving God through by the obedience to His Son. And then you'll see what real freedom is, and you'll see what real support is. Because we got the backing, support, the power, the mightiness that comes from the Lord Jesus Christ. I'll just say you're free. So if you were disfellowship, you're free, for real. Don't go pining after it to go back. Do you need it? If you've been gone for a while, do you really need it? Christ can set you free for real. And then you're free. So is this scriptural to disfellowship? Yes, but it's the wrong scripture. 1 Corinthians 5:11 and 13 is the wrong scripture in terms of disfellowshipping. It's Romans 6:16. That's the scriptural precedent for disfellowshipping. You're a slave. You present yourself as a slave, then you're subjected to all, or you're subject then to all the rules that they can put on a slave. Now, if you leave that slavery, you're out of that slavery, don't go back to the slavery. Now you're free. But I do want to cover one other thing in terms of the 1 Corinthians 5 issue, so that we can really see what that was really all about. Now I'm going to go back to that scripture in 1 Corinthians chapter 5, because I just want you to understand what Paul was saying, just for your, something to think about for yourselves, to really get this thing in mind of what he was doing. Now, you have to understand the context of this, what was happening in this time and era with the Corinthian Christians. So if you look at chapters 12 and 14, you have to understand that the Corinthians who became Christians were now under the authority of Jesus Christ and in His kingdom, and they had come out of Satan's kingdom. So they're doing things, and they are having supernatural things that are happening to them. And they are actually doing supernatural things. So even though they hadn't matured fully, they were still in a spiritual infancy, there were supernatural things going on that gave people around them evidence that this was something new, that they were indeed Christians displaying and becoming mighty in the power of Christ. So lo and behold, you got this one guy who comes along who says he's a Christian, he's in the kingdom, he's doing supernatural things. And the one thing that Paul had to really kind of address in there was to remind them that it really ain't about the supernatural thing. That's a great display. Don't get me wrong, it's a great display, but you had to live righteously. That's why Paul said that unrighteous people will not inherit God's kingdom. It was you have to live righteously. It's more important than the supernatural things. To be a Christian, you have to live righteously as a Christian. So you got this guy comes along who is not living righteous. In fact, he's living and doing something that's so outlandish that the nations generally don't do. This man is having sex with his father's wife, more likely his stepmother. Now I want to just drop something in that really brings this thing to how crazy it was for what this dude was doing, and then for them to be around it. He's having sexual relations with his stepmother, his father's wife, not his mother, but his father's wife. And do you realize that in Deuteronomy chapter 27, verse 20, a man who does that is accursed? So think about that. You got this man associating with you who's under a curse and you're under blessing. Paul was like, you got to get that man away from you. Don't let this dude be around you living like that. He's an accursed man. He's around you. Y'all eating with him. Y'all sharing with him. Y'all doing all this thing. Remove that wicked man from among yourselves. Because that man is wicked. He is cursed by God for the actions that he took. That curse was still in effect. You bring a cursed thing into your house and into your company, guess what happens to you? You become accursed. Then the same demons that's harassing him then will now start harassing you. That's what Paul was really getting at with these guys, with the Corinthian Christians. Remove that man from among yourself. In other words, don't call yourself a Christian. So what they was basically saying to him, hey man, don't come around us. You can't hang with us doing that. And then it wasn't a secretive thing. Everyone knew, and then everyone in the congregation made the decision. They all agreed. You may not realize this, but a lot of voting took place in the first century Christians, with the first century Christians, and what was to take place. Even that quote-unquote governing body meeting they talk about in Acts chapter 15 was not a governing body meeting. That's why in the letter they wrote, they said, we ourselves, and the whole congregation. So everyone, the congregation was there doing that decision. It's the same thing here. Everyone in the congregation was in on this. When Paul said, remove that man from among yourself, everyone in the congregation had to agree to remove the man. But it's like, hey, don't hang around us. Don't call yourself a Christian and you live in an accursed life. That's all that was going on with that thing. See, so when you stop and think about it, it wasn't what we think about now. It wasn't done as how Jehovah's Witnesses do it when they disfellowship a person or meet a judicial committee meeting. And the reason why they have to do that the way Jehovah's Witnesses do it is because of a thing called Ecclesiastical Privilege. There's a confidentiality thing that goes into it, and you can't go sharing that information, or guess what? They can be sued. Ecclesiastical Privilege is something that's given by the state. It's a legal thing. It's not a scriptural thing. So, as I mentioned before, the power from Jehovah's Witnesses comes from the constitution of the country they're in, not from the scriptures. So anyway, look, I want to throw this point out to you. Leave something in the comment section, whether you agree, disagree, or anything. Give me some comments back on this. Like, share, and subscribe. This is the Disciple Rick, and I'm out.